Greetings and salutations, everyone. My name is Andrew Kirchhoff, and welcome to my YouTube channel. Today, we're going to be talking about the Fantasy Football Week 13 wide receiver rankings. So on today's episode, it will be broken down as such. I'm going to be starting off by talking about the matchups for the wide receiver position going into Week 13 of the fantasy football season, seeing who has the best and worst matchups going into the week, and how I think that can specifically affect my rankings that I will be talking about shortly after that. Again, my rankings are a 1 through 36 rankings list. All rankings are subject to change. There's obviously a bunch of information with injury news coming out daily, so it'll always change. But this, in my opinion, is the best idea of how I think Week 13 is going to play out as we all try to make a push towards those playoffs in order to either get into the playoffs or sustain our position in the playoffs. So before we begin, hey everybody, I just want to go ahead and shout out everybody. Hope you guys are doing well. We're at Wednesday. It's a hump day. Hopefully everyone's doing well, getting through the week so that we can finally get to Thursday Night Football between the Saints and the Cowboys. At the end of this episode, I will be going over that Thursday night game, talking about those specific players. So if you stay tuned at the end of the episode, or you can go down below. There is timestamps below if you want to get to that. Other than that, let's get right into it, shall we? So here we are. We are talking about fantasy points against, which is basically how much points do specific defenses give up to the wide receiver position on a weekly basis in half-point PPR scoring. Everything I talk about is half-point PPR scoring, whether it's statistics or in my rankings. All of it is for half-point PPR if you're new here. Okay, so as I was mentioning, we're talking about the points given up to the wide receiver position, and the team that is giving up the most points as of right now to the wide receiver position is the New Orleans Saints. They play against the Cowboys on Thursday Night Football, which I mentioned a little bit before. Here's the thing. The only wide receiver that's going to be able to take advantage of this is Amari Cooper. And even in that specific scenario, I don't know if Amari Cooper can technically take advantage to this matchup to the point where he's going to be a 20-point wide receiver. You know, this past week he had a fantastic game last Thursday against the Washington Redskins. To be honest, the majority of his fantasy production was dictated on the lack of defense and or tackling from the secondary of the Redskins. So can Amari Cooper, honestly the only wide receiver on this team that really has any form of talent that's going to be able to break through this secondary, can he stand out and be fantasy relevant this week with the easiest matchup? I think there's a good chance that he's a great wide receiver, like a wide receiver 2, but I wouldn't technically put him into that wide receiver 1 conversation yet, considering Dallas is still a run-first team, and the Saints have been looking better and better as the weeks have gone by defensively. I mean, going ahead and turning around and only giving up a total of, 40 points in the last 3 weeks. That's pretty decent comparatively to what they were giving up earlier on in the season in all those shootouts that were taking place. So the Saints, they've clamped down a little bit, and I expect them to be better, but I mean, with Amari Cooper as the only receiver there, it's going to be hard for him. Anyway, moving on, the Philadelphia Eagles. The Redskins will be playing the Philadelphia Eagles this week. Here's the thing. Is there anyone that I can suggest for you to start? Unless you're in a deeper league and like a 16-man, 14-team league, something like that, I don't think there's a wide receiver here, unless you're going for Josh Doctson in a flex spot that you might want to be considering. Perhaps, I got a couple questions earlier today about Chris Thompson. Yes, he's practicing in full, but can he, take advantage of this? I'm not sure about that. It really just depends. Colt McCoy was decent this past week, but will they be able to take advantage of this, battered secondary? I think Josh Doctson is the best receiver of the bunch. So if you're considering it, he would be the best flex play for this matchup. Moving on, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers giving up the third most points to the wide receiver position. As we know, Devin Funchess missed this past week with his back injury that he sustained. Information will come out as the week progresses, but as of right now, DJ Moore is turning into that number 1 wide receiver behind Christian McCaffrey, of course. McCaffrey's the number 1 in everything over there. So if Christian McCaffrey could throw the ball, by all means, they would give him the ball and he would throw it also, okay? But anyway, Tampa Bay Buccaneers-wise, they're giving up a bunch of points. This past week, only gave up, 9 total points to the 49ers. That's going to change a little bit. The Panthers are on a 3-game skid in which they've lost 3 games in a row. The last 2 due to their kicker. I expect them to come back out and have a pretty efficient week, try to establish themselves as a team that can potentially make the playoffs, even though they're sitting at 6-5 right now. They were looking pretty a couple weeks back at 6-2. So they're going to try to get to 7-5 this week. I expect them to do so, and I expect DJ Moore to be a big component of that. The 49ers, another team giving up a lot of points to the wide receiver position. I really only have confidence in Larry Fitzgerald. I'll talk about him a little bit more in extent as I go through my rankings, but then again, Larry Fitzgerald is only catching a couple balls a week as of the last couple weeks, but he continues to find the end zone, which is a valuable thing, which we'll go over. The Tennessee Titans giving up points to the wide receiver position, as I told you guys. I mean, I don't like saying I told you so. I'd actually rather be wrong and say, okay, you know what, I can improve. But goodness gracious, those corners, they're not great. DeAndre Hopkins, by all means, should have had a better week this past week on Monday Night Football. Ended up with about 8 points in a half-point PPR, which is nothing to be proud of, to be honest. When you have DeAndre Hopkins, when you spent the high overall pick from him, he's not coming in through the clutch in easy matchups. It's difficult to trust. But this coming week, don't worry about DeAndre Hopkins. But anyway, the Tennessee Titans, right? They play against the Jets. Are the Jets going to be able to take advantage? It's the same concept with the Redskins. Can I suggest a player that I'm confident enough in that you can trust in such a valuable week? I'm not sure if there's a possibility there. Other than them, the New York Jets giving up the 6th most points. Corey Davis is going to be a big play this week. He's been looking better and better. Only had that bad game 2 weeks ago because of the fact that Marcus Mariota did sustain that injury halfway through the game, and Blaine Gabbert had to come in and take over. That's why he struggled that week. This past Monday, he had a great game, looked really good fantasy-wise, and I think he'll be able to continue to improve on that and have a good week against the Jets. Moving on, the Falcons. How much is Lamar Jackson going to be able to take advantage of that poor secondary of the Falcons? Not sure if he's going to be able to, but we'll just have to wait and see, because to be honest, they're a run-first team, and they're relying on the running game, short passes, and their defense, special teams to make plays. John Harbaugh, for the longest time, was a special teams coach in the league, so they're going to key in on defense, special teams, and then their offense and trying to run the ball and punish defenses so later on in the game they can have advantages. Moving on, the Rams struggling against the wide receiver position, mainly because Tyreek Hill had 40 points 2 weeks back. Kind of shifts the balance of it. But then again, playing against the Lions this week, Kenny Golladay should be decent. Moving on, the Redskins, goodness, man. The wide receivers of the Eagles, they haven't been great. And it's starting to concern me to the point where I don't know if I can suggest starting them. I'm going to have them in my rankings, but they're lower. They're fringe wide receiver 3s. That's the best you can get out of a Jeffrey or a Golden Tate going forward. That's it. So we'll talk about that a little bit a little bit later. All right, moving on. The last good matchup per se to the wide receiver position is the Cleveland Browns. And who plays against the Cleveland Browns? DeAndre Hopkins does. Hopefully he can come back and bounce back this coming week. Other than them, the Bengals giving up a bunch of points. That's great for anybody who's, goodness gracious, who do the Bengals play this week? I'm pretty sure I know this answer, but let's go find it, shall we? The Bengals play against Denver. Yeah, Emmanuel Sanders is probably going to be the only good one out of that group. Cortland Sutton hasn't really turned into what he thought he would end up, picking up all those Demaryius Thomas targets. Just really hasn't come together for him. Other than that, the 49ers, great. The Seahawks will be fantastic this week. Panthers giving up a bunch of points. That's fantastic because the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense is hungry for a W soon. The Bears are giving up points. The Broncos, Seattle Seahawks, Detroit Lions, which we'll talk about really soon. Kansas City, Oakland, blah, blah. Okay, no big deal. Let's talk about the top 4 matchups. We have the Buffalo Bills giving up the least points to the wide receiver position. The Buffalo Bills play against the... Goodness gracious. They play against the Miami Dolphins this week. Can Ryan Tannehill throw against this offense? I think he'll have a good opportunity to do so, but I'm not sure if there's any wide receiver other than Danny Amendola within this offense that I have a confidence within in order to start them. So that's just my thoughts on that. The Dallas Cowboys, stopping the passing game of many teams with their bolstered up secondary and their much improved defense. The way I see it, though, the Saints are a deadly offense. We'll talk about it a little bit later, but they're going to be able to feast on the Cowboys. I don't care what you throw in front of them. The Saints are just a better team overall. The Ravens giving people some struggles, so I'm not sure if the Atlanta Falcons are going to slow down offensively. I think they'll be just as good as they usually are. No big deal there. The Jaguars are playing tough, but goodness, they still can't win a game. So I'm just waiting for that defense to eventually give up and just let it just pour on eventually. The Vikings are playing good against the wide receiver position. Here's the thing. If Xavier Rhodes, who we saw sustained an injury this past week, if he is questionable and continues to miss practice, stay limited, ends up missing the game, Josh Gordon will get a boost in my rankings, but we'll talk about that when I get to him. Other than that, all these other defenses, the Chargers are playing tough against the wide receiver position. Should be able to have pretty good weeks, but we'll talk about it to an extent a little bit more. This is the points given up to the wide receiver position on a weekly basis for Week 13. Let's go ahead and move on to the anticipated wide receiver rankings for the week. All right, so here's the thought process here, okay? Now, you may be looking at this and be thinking, goodness gracious, Andrew, what happened, right? Okay, I understand. It may be a little crazy, but to be honest, what's the difference between having Brandin Cooks at 1 and having him at 10? You're going to start him anyway, right? I'm here to make a bold prediction that I honestly think that Brandin Cooks is going to be the number 1 wide receiver by the end of this week. Looking at the Lions secondary, I know Darius Slay is going to be the corner most likely matched up with Brandin Cooks. But here's the thing. The Lions love to run a man defense, right? They like to man up their corners. And to be honest, I'm not sure if the secondary of the Lions has enough speed in order to control Brandin Cooks. They're going to have to worry about the run game itself. They're going to have to worry about Higbee, Woods, Reynolds, Everett running around the field, making plays. I'm not sure if they're going to have enough to contain Brandin Cooks. Just looking at the points given up to the wide receiver position by the Lions, they're giving up the 17th most, okay, which is pretty good. I mean, that's they're better than half the team is in the league as of right now, as in giving up points to the wide receiver position. But as of late, just looking at these stats, this past week they played against the Chicago Bears, right? Chicago Bears did not have to pass the ball downfield. They had Chase Daniels at quarterback. And to be honest, the running backs of that team through the passing game were efficient enough to be able to settle it, right? So they weren't really tested. But the week prior, they gave up 25 points to DJ Moore, in which he had 157 receiving yards and a touchdown. The week before that, they gave up 133 to Allen Robinson and 122 to Anthony Miller. Okay, that's pretty ridiculous in itself. The week prior to that, somehow, some way, where is it? What the heck? They only, oh my goodness, they clamped down on the Minnesota Vikings. We're not going to talk about that. Moving forward, against the Seattle Seahawks, David Moore had 97 yards and a touchdown. Tyler Lockett ended up with a touchdown as well. The week before that, okay, they played against Miami, no big deal. But Danny Amendola was still able to be relevant, 84 yards and a touchdown. The week before that, against the Green Bay Packers, 140 yards for Davante Adams, clean, right? And then Scantling somehow was relevant with 68 yards and a touchdown. St. Brown had 89 yards receiving. I'm telling you, the secondary is not that good. My point is, okay, after reading out all those stats, the Rams are going to score a lot of points, ladies and gentlemen. Start up your Rams, maybe even all of them, and you should be confident in that. So we're moving on. Number 2, at the wide receiver position, we have Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill, he plays against the Raiders, and to be honest, when you have a guy such as Tyreek Hill who's leading all wide receivers in points this season, a guy that honestly can score 40 points in a week and win you the fantasy week, he's done it 3 times this season in which he's scored 35-plus points. I mean, goodness gracious, he has scored 30-plus points 4 times this season. 4 times. As a wide receiver, putting up 30-plus points, that's insane. In a half-point PPR, that's actually ridiculous. And to be honest, those kind of performances, they just win you the week outright. Because projection-wise, that just throws you up and above, and it can allow other players to either not perform as well, and he can carry the load, and or if they end up performing as they are projected, it just makes it gravy on top. All right, he's my number 2 this week against the Raiders. Should be a great matchup. Patrick Mahomes should be able to blow out this team. Tyreek Hill is the number 1 wide receiver, so there we go. Moving on, number 3, we have Davante Adams playing against The Cardinals this coming week. Cardinals secondary has not been great this season. They gave up a lot of points this past week in the passing game. To be honest, just think about it. Phillip Rivers was able to consecutively complete 28 total passes in a row. All right, 28 in a row. Now, I understand Phillip Rivers had a fantastic game. I expected it last week. I had him ranked 4th, right? I know that the Cardinals secondary, their defense as a whole, it's not looking great, right? They're in the rebuilding process. They're just trying to get Josh Rosen some reps, blah, 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 right? Doesn't matter. Davante Adams has been clutch all season long. He's the 3rd best wide receiver thus far this season in half-point PPR scoring. The guy is a 20-point monster a week, barring he gets that touchdown. And to be honest, he usually catches that touchdown. Even this past week against Xavier Rhodes in that tough number 1 matchup, right? Didn't matter. The guy ends up scoring touchdowns on Xavier Rhodes, scoring enough points. Should have had a second touchdown. He dropped that ball because Aaron Rodgers put a little bit too much on it, but he should have had that catch for sure. Either way, Davante Adams, he's my number 3. Number 4, Adam Thielen. Continuously being as good as anybody. Adam Thielen should be great against the New England secondary. Look, the thing is, the Jets gave the New England defense some troubles this past week. With Jermaine Kearse out there, Chris Herndon, they gave him some troubles. They were getting after it, and to be honest, I think there's a possibility that the Vikings have a pretty good game, perhaps win this game, and it's going to be on the backs of Adam Thielen and Stefon Diggs. Thielen's my number 4 this week. Michael Thomas, my number 5. I understand that the Cowboys secondary has been, they have been pretty efficient this season towards the wide receiver position. They give up a good amount of points to the tight end. So, I don't know how many tight ends there are on that Saints team. There are a good amount. I think there's 3. They have Ben Watson, Josh Hill, Dan Arnold. So which one of them is going to score a touchdown? That's beyond me. But all I know is Michael Thomas, even though the Dallas Cowboys defense has been great against the wide receiver position, it does not matter. Michael Thomas is a beast. He had a down week this past week. But to be honest, they really didn't need him to step up considering they had the game in, under wraps very early on and were able to contain it and pick up the W. He's my number 5. Number 6, we have Antonio Brown. Now, I expect Antonio Brown this week to come out and demand some targets. To be honestly, this past week when Juju Smith is getting all the targets, I'm sure that is pissing off Antonio Brown to an extent where he's going to have a man-to-man conversation with Big Ben and say, hey, I need the ball, get it to me. And they'll come to an understanding. Antonio Brown will be great. He's my number 6. Number 7, DeAndre Hopkins. As I mentioned before, didn't have a great performance this past week against the Titans, who don't have a great secondary, but he does play against the Cleveland Browns. They themselves have been struggling in the secondary thus far this season, and I expect DeAndre Hopkins to return to form, have himself a good week. He's my number 7 this week. Okay, number 8, Julio Jones. Has one of the tougher matchups of the week, playing against the Baltimore Ravens. Now, here's the thing. I really don't care who Julio plays. The whole question is, will Julio catch touchdown or will he not catch touchdown? That's literally it, because we know he's going to get 100-plus receiving yards. We know it. Okay, he can do it on one play. That's all it takes. And to be honest, I have the most confidence of all these receivers that Julio can get 100 yards plus, on a consistent basis, more than any of these guys, even above and below him, doesn't matter, right? It's just the question is, will he score that touchdown? That is the entire contingency on whether he's a number 1 receiver on these rankings or a number 8 as he is, right? So I'm expecting perhaps he doesn't get it, but no big deal because he'll end up in a PPR with 10 receptions, 100 and some odd yards. He'll be great. All right, moving on, number 9, Mike Evans. Panthers are giving up a lot of points to the wide receiver position as well thus far this season. Just this past week, Tyler Lockett was able to burn them for, 19 fantasy points and a half-point PPR. David Moore had about 18 fantasy points, each of them with 80-plus receiving yards and a touchdown. And I think Mike Evans with Jameis Winston under center. To be honest, it doesn't matter who's under center. Unless we're talking about Fitzpatrick, those 2 games prior to getting replaced where Mike Evans had disappeared. Thank goodness Jameis is in there, making Mike Evans owners rejoice. Finally, we have Mike Evans back. He can finally figure himself out and carry our fantasy teams where we need him to. Goodness gracious, what is it? Gosh, that was loud. This past week, or these last 2 weeks, with Jameis Winston under center, 6 receptions, 120 yards, and a touchdown. 6 receptions, 116 yards. So far so good. I expect him to do the same. It's really, again, will he score that touchdown in order to elevate his fantasy productivity on the day? We'll just have to wait and see, but he has a good matchup, so we'll see. All right, moving on. Stefon Diggs is my number 10. Okay, so with Adam Thielen currently with the questionable tag due to that leg injury, he's been dealing with it with a couple weeks. But here's the thing. I don't expect Adam Thielen to miss. And even if he does, Stefon Diggs is going to still be great. He'll still be the number one wide receiver. I mention it every week. Stefon Diggs is a number one wide receiver. He is going to, I think his contract is up this next season. So they're going to have to either pay him up or he's moving. I doubt they won't pay him because he's been so great for the organization. And Kirk Cousins needs this number 2 wide receiver that's really a number 1 wide receiver in order for this offense to work. But this coming week, and we saw it in the last couple weeks, he's been so damn good. He's been better than Thielen, to be honest, as of late. And I expect him to continue to be great because as much as teams want to stop Thielen, they can't stop both these guys, and Stefon Diggs continues to profit off that. Moving on, number 11, we have Robert Woods. Just for the same reason that Brandin Cooks is going to be great, I think this Rams offense is really going to put it onto the Lions this coming week. He should be fantastic. And it's even better that Josh Reynolds is actually quite good. You know, we didn't know what we were going to get. Were we going to get Cooper Kupp productivity? Were we going to get something a little bit less? It doesn't really matter. If Josh Reynolds is a threat and he's out there consistently, which he will be, it's going to just help Woods and Cooks continue to make plays. He's my number 11 this week. Number 12, we have Keenan Allen ending up the wide receiver ones for this week, in my opinion. Here's the thing. Keenan Allen's just been fantastic. He's been on fire as of late, and I'm so happy as of right now. The last couple weeks, double-digit fantasy points, of course, but in half-point PPR scoring, 18.2, 14.7, 19.5, and 16.7. 3 touchdowns in a touchdown each of the last 3 weeks, 3 total touchdowns in the last 3 weeks. It's been fantastic. He's been consistent. And this coming week against the Steelers, who, honestly, their secondary has been a little bit weak this season. I expect Keenan Allen to have a great week. And I expect him to be more involved within this offense because of the fact that Melvin Gordon is out. So I expect him to be good. He's my number 12. Number 13, Juju Smith-Schuster, staying in that same game, Pittsburgh versus the Chargers. The Chargers defense, their secondary has been great this season. But here's the thing. Juju Smith, if he continues to haul in the amount of targets he is continuously getting, I mean, he's incredible. Juju Smith-Schuster is a number 1 wide receiver thus far this season. He is actually he's the number 10 wide receiver in half-point PPR scoring this season. I mean, it's insane. He had a very, very, very good game this past week. 31 fantasy points. I mean, are we going to see that again? Are we going to see him catch a 97-yard touchdown again? I doubt it. But then again, he continues to get a bunch of targets. I mean, guys, he had 17 targets this past week. As a number 2 wide receiver on an offense, you're getting 17 targets. That's insane. 13 receptions. I expect him to, obviously probably get like 7 less targets, maybe get 10 targets this next week, which is going to bring down his production, but I still expect him to be great, especially in a game that the Steelers must win in order to claim this division, because maybe perhaps those Ravens, they end up coming and sneaking by. Anyway, moving on. Let's see. Actually, no, they beat the Ravens twice this season. It's a 1-1 split, so we'll see. That's going to be something to keep your eye on. All right, moving on. Odell Beckham Jr., my number 14 this coming week. Here's the thing. I don't know, man. I'm a little upset. Odell Beckham wasn't able to do much against the Eagles this past week, even though it was a very advantageous matchup. But here's the issue that I have with it. They didn't want to win that game. The Giants, I'm telling you, did not want to win that game. They had it in the bag at halftime. All they had to do was run the ball. But instead, they kept Saquon Barkley off the field. They kept Odell Beckham off the field. And they just continued to let the ball go the other way and let the Eagles score and win. Literally, that is what happened. And it kind of worries me to the extent where, okay, what happens when the Bears are up a bunch of points this coming week? And they're like, all right, no big deal. We want to lose anyway. We want a high draft pick. Get Odell out of there. What happens when that occurs? It's just, it's concerning. So this coming week, besides the fact that the secondary of the Bears is great, or better than, I don't know if they're better, but they know how to double cover a wide receiver when he's the only one on the field. So I think they'll be able to hold down Odell Beckham to an extent. He's my number 14. Number 15, Emmanuel Sanders, playing against Cincinnati Bengals secondary and defense. He should be able to have a good week, barring that he has 10-plus targets. That's all we want. 12, 10 targets, 10 receptions. That's pretty good. I'll take it. And that's what I expect to see. To be honest, the Bengals defense as a whole, they're going to get slaughtered. I expect Phillip Lindsay to be great this week, and hopefully Emmanuel Sanders can be that 1-2 punch and figure it out for fantasy owners this week. He's my number 15. 16 is Amari Cooper. I expect him to have a decent week. I'm not saying he's having a top 10 week just because he plays the Saints. The Saints, they're still a good defense, right? Marshawn Lattimore, he's a good cornerback. He will be able to hold his own. Sure, Amari Cooper, he's a good wide receiver. But how much do we trust in Dak? Because Dak will get him the ball. It's just up to Amari to be able to make the play with his legs. We'll see what happens this week. He's my number 16, just a safer wide receiver too. Number 17, we have AJ Green again. We have the little asterisk next to him just because of the fact that we're not sure if he's going to play or not. He has said that he wants to play and that he feels like he can play this week. Until we see him in a full practice, I'm a little concerned. But they also asked him in the press conference, AJ, how do you feel about Jeff Driscoll at quarterback instead of Andy Dalton? He said, don't worry about it. As long as Jeff Driscoll throws the ball anywhere near me in my wingspan, I will catch it. We'll be fine. That's great because he needs to start for my team this week so I can make the playoffs in one of my leagues. All right, let's do this, baby. Moving on, we have number 18, Kenny Golladay. All right, so here's the thing about Kenny Golladay. He is pretty much the only receiver on this team, and with Marvin Jones going to the IR, I expect him to continuously get targets. He's playing against the Rams this week. Secondary has been a little sketchy. I expect the Rams to get ahead really early, and I expect the Lions to have to throw the ball the entire second half, in which pretty much falls into the Kenny Golladay game plan, and he should be fine this week in fantasy, a good wide receiver too. All right, moving on to the second half of the wide receivers this coming week, week 13 of the fantasy football season. We have Julian Edelman as my number 19. Here's the thing. We've seen slot wide receivers torch the Vikings defense at times and really make it troubling for them. This coming week, I think Julian Edelman is continuously getting the targets for a guy that, honestly, many people didn't draft early because of his suspension. He has come on really strong as of late. He's just, as of the last couple weeks, just reading his statistics. Since he came back, okay, the first game he played, he had 9.2 fantasy points. Since then, he has not had a game less than 10 points. In fact, it's been 14 points, 12 points, 16, 14, 15, 16. I mean, he's tearing it up. The target counts, 10, 10, 12, 9, 7, 8, 5. He's tearing it up, guys. He is so good right now, and I think he is the best wide receiver on that team. Even with Gronk back and Michelle back and Gordon out there being effective, it only helps Julian Edelman because they really have to worry about all the other parts of this offense. James White out of the backfield. Julian Edelman's going to consistently be great. He's my number 19 this week. Number 20, we have Corey Davis playing against the Jets. Jets secondary sucks. We know that the Jets are a terrible team. Sorry if you're a Jets fan, but you're in the rebuilding process. You know that for a fact. You know your team wasn't, ready to win this year. What they need to first off do is get a better running back. I mean, plain and simple. The offensive line is pretty good on that team. Sam Darnold will improve. You need a better wide receiver core. You need a better running back. The defense can play up to teams. Okay, they can play up. Just got to get a little bit better pass rush, and you'll be fine. Okay, but other than that, speaking of the Titans and Corey Davis, he's going to be able to be just fine. He's the number one wide receiver of this team. Continues to find targets from Marcus Mariota. Consistently has been good as of late, and I expect him to get better moving on. Moving on to the next wide receiver I wanted to mention is Tyler Lockett playing against the 49ers. Tyler Lockett has been the number one wide receiver of this team. The Seattle Seahawks, they have 100% been leaning on him to be the number one wide receiver. The last couple weeks, I mean, it's been kind of boom or bust, and that's pretty much been his season. He either catches a touchdown and has himself a good double-digit fantasy week, or he ends up in, the 9-8 point range in a half-point PPR. I think because of how, advantageous this matchup against the 49ers is, he's going to be able to feast. I expect him to take top off the defense, continuously find targets from Russell Wilson, and be fantasy relevant this week. He's my number 21. Number 22, we have T.Y. Hilton. Now, T.Y. I'm worried always when he plays the Jaguars. Here's the thing about the Jaguars. As soon as you draft T.Y. Hilton, you have to know that he's not going to be playing out of his mind against that team. They have a good secondary. It is a fact. They're going to play him tough, and they're going to try to stop him. That's going to make Eric Ebron that much better. We saw it last time Eric Ebron played against the Jaguars. He had 3 touchdowns. Now that Doyle's gone, just wait for it. Anyway, T.Y. Hilton should be good this week, but to an extent, he's a wide receiver 2, low end at that point because of the matchup. Otherwise, I still have confidence in him. I'm a little worried about the matchup. Moving on, number 23, we have Larry Fitzgerald playing against the Packers this week. Here's the thing. As I mentioned before, that I really wanted to talk about Larry Fitzgerald and how he's been performing thus far this season. It's actually quite surprising how ridiculous he's been as of the last couple games. Can I get this to work, or what the heck? Please? Goodness. Maybe if I just type up Larry Fitz right here. Maybe? All right, Larry Fitz. All right, so as of the last couple weeks, since Josh Rosen has been the quarterback and Byron Leftwich has been the offensive coordinator, here are some stats. You ready for it? Larry Fitzgerald has caught 5 touchdowns in the last 5 games. Fantastic. Isn't that amazing? In fact, he's had 12 fantasy points, 22, 8, 15, and 2. Now, here's the worry. The worry is that the last 2 weeks, he's only had 2 catches in each of these weeks. This past week, 2 catches for 30 yards and a touchdown. The week before that, 2 catches for 23 and 2 touchdowns. Is there a concern factor with Larry Fitzgerald not getting that many targets, not getting that many receptions, and potentially being used at a minimal level because of how bad Josh Rosen has been as of late? I say no. I think the matchup is pretty primed and ready for them. I think this game is going to be a high scoring. They're going to have to score a lot of points on the Cardinals side of the ball. Therefore, I think Larry Fitzgerald will consistently be. If he's the red zone target of this team, you have to play him, especially in a standard. He just has so much touchdown upside. It's amazing. Anyway, he's my number 23. Number 24, we have DJ Moore playing against Tampa Bay. I expected a couple weeks back, right? When they played Tampa Bay, I think it was about 3 or 4 weeks ago, I said DJ Moore is going to have a breakout game. Didn't have it, but every week subsequent to that, he has been fantastic. And I expect this coming week for him to finally have that big game I expected him to have against Tampa Bay. He should have majority of the targets as a wide receiver on that team. Devin Funchess has been banged up. Curtis Samuel here and there could get a couple receptions, but either way, it's all DJ Moore's work to be had. And then moving on, we have Tyler Boyd at 25. Hopefully Driscoll could spread the ball out with A.J. Green returning, could help him out. I expect him to be better. He did look good in the second half of that game when they were playing against a poor secondary with the Cleveland Browns, so Tyler Boyd was able to take advantage of that. Then again, this coming week, they play against the Denver Broncos, which have been a tough secondary. The no-fly zone, a.k.a. It just really depends if A.J. Green plays, in my opinion. We'll see how this offense turns out, but he should be a decent wide receiver 3 this coming week, Tyler Boyd. All right, moving on, number 26, Josh Gordon. The only reason I have Josh Gordon so low is because there's so many mouths to feed. You have Gronk, you have Edelman, you have White, you have Michelle, you have Cordell Patterson, you have Hogan, you have Dorsett. You have so many. Burkhead is coming back. You have so many mouths to feed within this offense that, who's to say whether Josh Gordon ends up scoring that touchdown this week? That's why I have him at a wide receiver 3 this week, higher end wide receiver 3 in that matter. If Xavier Rhodes is out this coming week, I expect him to go up in my rankings to a wide receiver 2, and you can confidently play him in that position. Otherwise, then again, there's just a lot of mouths to feed within that offense. Moving on. Number 27, we have Alshon Jeffery playing against the Redskins. Okay, here it is, baby. Alshon Jeffery, man, you've been terrible as the last couple weeks, and that is a fact. Okay, there's nothing to argue against it, but to be honest, we're hoping. As Alshon Jeffery owners, we want you to play better. For those of you who are sitting here thinking, man, I can't play this man anymore, he is killing me, don't play him. To be honest, just don't play him. He is not worth the risk. These guys, the Eagles wide receivers, Alshon Jeffery and Golden Tate, who I'll go over in a little bit, they are at best wide receiver 3s rest of the season. This team just hasn't looked great as of late, offensively, defensively, and they've been struggling a lot, so just can't put too much trust in the wide receivers of this team. All right, moving on, number 28, we have Allen Robinson playing against the, who did the Bears? They play against the Giants. All right, not a big deal. If Mitchell Trubisky's playing, it's definitely a boost. Now, if, in fact, the way it looks, if Chase Daniel plays, this is where I have him. I have him at a wide receiver 3 at best. Because, to be honest, Chase Daniel just didn't look great. really wasn't able to take advantage of the matchup himself. They dictated a lot of the offense on Tyreek Cohen and being able to pass the ball out of the backfield there and working off of their defense, making a lot of plays, giving them short field positions. As of right now, if it's Trubisky, I will start Allen Robinson as wide receiver 3. Otherwise, it's a sketchy play this week. Moving on. Number 29, Josh Reynolds. I'm telling you, I expect this team to be great. I expect them to kill the Lions this coming week, and I expect them to be a very fantasy, safe game, per se. Anybody on the Rams, if you own them, play them this week. I think it's going to be a pretty safe fantasy week to play these kind of guys. All right, moving on to number 30, we have Demaryius Thomas. Demaryius Thomas looked good this past week. It came to the sacrifice of a lot of DeAndre Hopkins points, but then again, it doesn't really matter because Kiki Cutie wasn't good either. Demaryius Thomas was pretty much the best wide receiver on that team on Monday night. And they dictated a lot of the offense on running the ball. Deshaun Watson ran the ball. Lamar Miller, Alfred Blue, they ran the ball a ton. And I think this coming week, Demaryius Thomas can continue to be a decent wide receiver 3 play, assuming that then again teams are double covering DeAndre Hopkins and Deshaun Watson continues to find Thomas. So he's a wide receiver 3 at best. Moving on to Doug Baldwin, kind of the same deal, man. Can we trust Doug Baldwin? He's going to get targets. He's going to get receptions, but whether he catches that touchdown, it's a big if. Moving on, number 32, Calvin Ridley. Ridley's been good as of late. Again, another touchdown-dependent wide receiver. He plays in a tougher matchup, which then again doesn't mean that he's not going to find success. Calvin Ridley is a guy that's been surprising us all season long, the best rookie wide receiver on the season. And as of right now, I have a good amount of confidence to play him as a wide receiver 3 if that's the best available guy you have. Because otherwise, the guys above him, Baldwin, Thomas, Reynolds, Robinson, perhaps even Jeffrey, I might have a little bit more confidence because they just have better matchups this coming week. Moving on. Number 33 is Adam Humphries. To be honest, Adam Humphries could be higher on this list. The amount of targets he continuously gets, the amount of points that he has been getting as of late, he's come on strong in the second half of this season, and he has looked great as a slot receiver for this Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense. Coming into this week against the Panthers, they should be able to take advantage of that, and I expect Adam Humphries to be used at a premium, and perhaps if he's lucky enough, catches that touchdown. Moving on, number 34, as I mentioned, the Eagles wide receivers are wide receiver 3s at best. In a PPR is literally a full point PPR is my most confidence with Golden Tate. Otherwise, I really don't want to touch him. It scares me a lot, and I expect, there's always a chance that Zach Ertz is the only guy that catches the ball out of that team. Maybe even Nelson Aguilar comes and steals a couple catches here and there, and it hurts the production of a Golden Tate. But a PPR, full PPR, that's the only place I find Golden Tate to have any value this year. In a half-point PPR, he's very, very sketchy play. All right, moving on to the last 2 guys I wanted to mention for this coming week. We have Sammy Watkins coming off of a bye week. The last time we saw the Chiefs, they were in that barn burner of an offensive Monday night game. Sammy Watkins was injured. He played injured, but he didn't play the majority of the game. If he is healthy this week against the Raiders, man, he can definitely find some advantages within that secondary. If Tyreek Hill is pulling double coverage, Sammy Watkins will find himself open, and he could potentially have a good wide receiver week as a wide receiver 3 this coming week if he's able to find that touchdown. That's the theme with wide receiver 3s. That's a theme with many of the wide receivers that I talk about. If they don't catch touchdowns, I mean, you either have to really rely upon receptions and targets, or you have to rely upon yards. And yards, that's just that's probably you could probably guess or project yards more than anything, but then again, sometimes you never know. Anyway, moving on to the last wide receiver I wanted to mention, the 49ers. This is a key matchup. I'm telling you, the Seattle Seahawks are going to be able to take advantage of it. David Moore has been playing great this season as a guy that's just been a red zone target for Russell Wilson and the Seahawks. I expect him to have a decent week here for a wide receiver 3. Could potentially then again be better than Doug Baldwin, assuming he catches that touchdown over him. And that's basically it, everybody. I want to thank everybody for watching. We've ramped through 40 minutes of this video. Anyway, so that's basically it. If you have any questions, hit me down below. Really quickly, before I end this video, I want to talk about the Thursday night game tomorrow. Ezekiel Elliott has to start. Alvin Kamara has to start. Those are the for sures, other at the running back position, okay? Mark Ingram can be a decent play, but I like him where I have him in my rankings. So if anybody that you're considering is higher than Mark Ingram, I would go with them. Other than that, in a PPR, Mark Ingram, I think there are better options than him. Like Tyreek Cohen could be a better option in a full PPR comparatively. Guys that really get receptions out of the backfield, perhaps even Dion Lewis against the Jets could be a better option this coming week. So Mark Ingram is it just depends if he's your best option or not. Other than the running backs, the quarterback position, I really like Drew Brees as usual. Dak Prescott, it could be a decent play, but then again, I don't know how many of you are relying upon a Dak Prescott this coming week. If you play in a 2-quarterback league, I'm sure that is one of your options. You probably have to go with it. I don't have my quarterback rankings available as of right now, but just off the top of my head, like thinking of the range I had him last week, would I play Lamar Jackson over him? Yes. Would I play Jameis Winston over him? Yes. Would I play Mariota over him? Yes. So basically that's the range. I would play Mariota, Lamar Jackson, and Jameis Winston all over Dak Prescott this week for sure. So if those are available, I would definitely take those options before him. Other than that, the wide receiver positions, Amari Cooper, as I mentioned, Mike Thomas, those are the good wide receivers for sure. Other than them, I'm not really trusting anybody else on the Cowboys, receiver-wise or tight end-wise. On the other side of the ball, we have the Saints. Traquan Smith should be healthy, but then again, I'm not touching any of them. I would rather stick with the guys that I have on screen and probably go with them accordingly. And that's pretty much it. Tight end-wise for the Saints, it's pretty much a toss-up on whether one of those tight ends catches a ball, like I mentioned before. Defensively, I like both these defenses, but then again, I'm not going to play defense against the Saints. I refuse to do so, and I would not mind starting the Saints defense against the Dak Prescott led offense. It's not a bad idea. Anyway, so those are my thoughts. Just wanted to go through those. Anyway, thank you everybody for watching. If you haven't already, click that like button down there. If you haven't, subscribe. And that's pretty much it. I will see you guys tomorrow as I talk about quarterbacks and tight ends, but that's pretty much it. I'll see you guys later. Peace.